Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Good morning. It's 10:41 on Thursday, July 30th, 2026. Today is day 4,934 days in a row for me of artwork. We're going to continue with this painting here. So this is part of the Our Bodies series, or as I'm calling it. This is the second painting in the series. And the focus today is going to be on these fingers here. And hopefully I'll have time to get to some places within the portrait. And we'll talk about a lot of the aspects or fundamentals of painting that I think about when I'm moving through those parts of the painting. And hopefully I can communicate some things that are going to help you out, especially value. Value, get my value thing here. The transition from light to dark within color, not just in black and white. Value is super, super important. And I want to show you a couple things that I've been looking at, or I have been looking at. I'm going to show my screen here with this painting in particular. There we go. So I'm going to show you a close-up of the painting. So this was the photo that I took yesterday after the session on this painting. It's a little bit blurry. I think I'm past 100%. No, I'm at 100% on this. Not super sharp because I took this with my cell phone. So it's not super sharp. And the first thing that I noticed, especially when I was kind of zoomed out on it, when we're at this level of zooming out, I'm looking at these fingernails. And what happens with fingernails in particularly, laugh lines, different parts of the body that creates lines. Usually we look at those. I'm going to go back into 100%. We look at those visually. We see the image of it, and we see those delineated values very clearly. But when we paint them as clear as we think we see them, they don't look right. They look a bit overstated, a bit too harsh. And that's what I feel like with these fingernails here. It's like very harsh, almost like they're painted. They're not as natural as they could be. The end of the finger becomes this spike of fingernail that is just blaring at you. Hey, look at me, I'm a fingernail. And I want to show you what I'm thinking about when we talk about squinting in particular. So this is the photo that I'm working from. I can show it a bit bigger. Maybe this will show a little bit better. If you're on a phone or a small screen or something like that, I want you to see this. Now, when we look at this, when we look at these fingernails, we definitely see these cuticles, right? And this is part of, most of bodies, right? And we see this definite end of the finger and beginning of fingernails. And there's a definite kind of line that is circling these fingernails. And normally when we paint fingernails, we're going to put those lines in as we see them. We can do them one of two ways. I showed two ways yesterday on how to paint that. One of them is you actually paint the lines in. The other one is you do like a darker background, and that is the cuticles, and then you put the light over top that paint. I kind of like the way that that looks, but I still think they're a bit overstated. And a way to understand that is something that I talk about a lot, is squinting. This is a behavior that we can use through every painting process, through every subject matter that we ever use. We can basically squint down. And what that does is we have eyelashes. Hopefully we have eyelashes on our eyelids. And when we squint down, those eyelashes kind of come together and they obscure the visual image that we're looking at. We're sitting there, we're kind of squinting our eyes down. Those eyelashes come in, it blurs out what we're looking at, and it darkens what we're looking at. And it brings a lot of those values that should be closer together, because we see them as these very delineated separations of this definite value here versus this value here. But when we squint down, that's going to give us a simplistic understanding with our eyelashes coming together, a more simplistic understanding of the entirety of this value range, not just the cuticles on the fingernails themselves, but what's happening around them, and bring some of those values together, simplify, and that's going to allow us to make something that looks a little bit more natural. Now, I tried to do this. I'm going to show you right here. I tried to do this digitally. So here's what we're going to see. Now, yeah, I'm going to turn it back off. Here's the original image. Here's the image with a lens blur applied to it, and bringing down the exposure just a little bit without with. And this is approximating, pretty closely what I'm seeing when I squint down at this image, even the digital image. And now let's look at what we're seeing here, because this is the important part of it. And I can flip back and forth a lot of times to let you see this. So let's focus on this finger here. And I can even blow this up even larger. This finger right here, right in the center of your screen. Okay, we can definitely see the darkness, the shadow side of these cuticles, the light side of the fingernail. Definitely see the end of the fingernail that gets a little bit wider. Now, when we squint down, you can see how that cuticle there, where we saw a definite separation, even a separation from the finger and the neck. Now, when we squint down, this all just blends in. The sharpness is gone, yes, but also on this side of the cuticle, there's a bit of a blending that's happening. So there's a shadow side of this finger here that turns into the cuticle. There's not that definite delineation that we see. This is also a product of, our eyes adjust depending on the light. If we go into shadow, our pupils are going to dilate, get a little bit larger to try and bring in as much light as possible. The same thing happens when we focus on, let's say, a shadow shape, like the shadow area underneath a tree, or especially here, the shadows under this neck. And when we look at this shadow area, our eyes are going to dilate a little bit more, give us more information, and we're going to see much more in this shadow area than it's really necessary. But when we squint down, you can see how those cuticles are basically gone. It's the darkness of, this finger in shadow. We have some lighter area of the skin, and then this whole tip is dark. The only thing that brightens it up is a little bit of the highlight on the fingernail there, and then the very tip of the fingernail. And that's it. Super simple. You can see it here in this finger. Where's the cuticle? Where does it begin and end? It doesn't matter. It basically blends into the entirety of the finger. The same here with this pinky. Pretty much the same here, although we do see a little bit of lighter area to the left of that finger. Here we see a little bit more of those cuticles and that separation. I'll go back and forth a couple times. Hopefully you can see that. And we can repeat this with every object that we look at by just squinting down, getting our eyelashes to come across each other, squint down. And hopefully if you're looking at this image at high res, squint down, right? Squint and see that change. I see it. I definitely see it when I'm squinting here at this image. And then open your eyes fully, and I'll switch it to here, and you'll see some similarities, I think. So that is a concept that I feel is tremendously important, because I was talking about it yesterday, especially when we're drawing faces of younger individuals, and we see something like a laugh line, right? Or a little bit of crow's feet or something, those kind of folds in the skin. For younger individuals, for women, for young kids, if we put those in at the values that we're actually seeing them, we're going to age that individual by like 5 to 10 years. And we're going to go, wow, that person looks a lot older. So we have to be really, really careful of values, and make sure that when those lines appear, when we see them on fingernails, when we see them on eyes, when we see them on, like, I have this kind of like these lines right here in the middle of my eyes that happen, even when I squint down, you can definitely see it. And sometimes I put those in, like right here and these lines here, you know, of age lines. I put those in on my face when I'm doing self portraits, and I'm like, wow, I look a lot older. Maybe that's what I want to do. I want to make myself look a lot older, but most of the time, not. So I choose to put those in, but I adjust the value a little bit lighter than I think it needs to be. And change the edges on these areas so that they blend in a little bit more. They're not as harsh. They're not as they don't stand out as much. They don't kind of scream at you. And I feel like this is what's happening here within this painting is I didn't correctly judge the values of those cuticles. I think they're too dark and they need to fade a little bit more and in multiple areas. So I'm going to work on that first. And that's what we're going to go into. Now, noticing the subtlety of values. Actually, I forgot. I wanted to show you this. I wanted to show you in addition to that, because it's all about noticing the subtlety of values, which is really important. So within the painter's path, I've started doing, and this is a whole new image I want to show you. I started doing a course drawing, beginning drawing for oil painters. So that's on my website, chrisbevan.com/TPP. The painter's path. Just go to my website. You'll see the link at the, within the stream. But the very first thing that we're doing on beginning drawing for painters is this pear. And, it's kind of what we start out with pears, with apples, with spheres. And I'm having, the beginning of the painter's path is all about accuracy, but I'm having us map out light, where the light side begins, where the shadow side ends, all of the halftone, center light, highlight, everything that is within light itself and the aspects of light. Now, the next lesson within the beginning drawing for oil painters is going to be all about these aspects for light. But it's very related to what I'm talking about here on this painting with all of these little cuticles on the fingers and those subtleties within those values. And I was doing a test as I was looking at this pear, because everything is switched to black and white because we're just doing drawing within that course. And what I do here is I take my brush and I'll pick like a color or a value at a particular part on this image, and then I'll paint it in a separate location. As you can see here, this is basically the pear simplified within its value range without all that texture and all those little dots, and how it goes from light to dark. And the one thing that I wanted to kind of show off here that was the most important is there's usually this rule that people say within light and shadow. And they say, and I've repeated it several times before, but it's not always true. And the rule is, the quote unquote rule is that everything in the light side, so everything on the left of this teal line here, which is in the light side, we got our highlight, we got our center light, we got our 3 halftones here, right? All of those values should always, nothing in the shadow side should be as light as those values, to have a clear separation between the light side and the shadow side. But when we're dealing with something like this pear that has reflected light, a very bright reflected light, not only is this pear glossy, but maybe there's a brighter light there that's kind of bringing things in, it will confuse that rule and confuse us. And it'll show you how most rules that you apply in art really do not apply to everything. So I took this value here. This is the halftone right before it passes. You see this line here. Let me follow the line. Oh my goodness. So yeah, this line, no, that's the darker part. That got moved a little bit, but this little piece here, right before it passes into the shadow side, the terminator of that shadow, this dark area right here, I drug that into the rest of the shadow shape. Now that's supposed to be on the light side. It's still a halftone, but it still is almost exactly the same as the highlight on that side of the pear. Now, the one thing about this pear, and I talk about it in the painter's path, the bottom of it gets really confusing because we have all kinds of reflected light coming up into here. And so it was very difficult to understand Where is the separation between light side and dark side? And you can see when we look at, this whole area of the pear down here, when I'm looking at it without trying to paint it, it's almost exact same shade all the way through. And so I did a test with it, did the same thing here. Every value that's above this value range, I did a pick of color on the pear right above it and just brought it down into this area. This is where I'm delineating like light side on the left, dark side on the right, okay? But you can see how similar all these values are. Maybe this is still light side, I'm not sure. But then I also took these values here and I drug them through the entire shadow shape. And it's like they just all blend together except for that super bright highlight value on the end. And that's, close to the lighter side. And the reason why I wanted to show you this, the reason why that I feel that this is important is because one of our tasks as painters, one of our tasks as artists and being representational artists is training ourselves to see all the subtlety within those values, like the tremendous amount of subtlety that can happen within every image that we see, every bit of life, everything that's out there. And the unhelpful, I guess, tip on how to see values more, that is very unhelpful, is to paint more, to really get deep into it, really look at it. And you're like, oh my gosh, well, of course, Chris, that's part of it, but it's unhelpful. And that's always going to be part of art, like doing it as often as we can, as much as we can to get better at anything. Hey, Dennis, welcome. It's going well. Thank you for asking. But the whole squinting thing and looking at how the values change within your reference, how things get really close together, and then going ahead and determining on like how you should, not should, how we can just go ahead and bring those values together to make it look a little bit more natural instead of heavy-handed delineation of everything, if that makes sense. Like those subtle transitions are what we want to train to look at in the shadow shapes, where there's half a step or a quarter step of value change from one to the other, and seeing that and then determining, should we put it down or should we not? Should we compress those values together and make this one big kind of shape? Or do we want to make those very delineated because it's important for the the narrative? Should never eat before these streams. It's making me make sounds. Okay. First thing I want to do, because like I said, I want to go in here. Oh, I need to remove LaFay's hair, cat hair off of this. I usually keep most of the cat hairs there, but this one is in a particularly bad place. Oh my goodness. I just buried it deeper into the painting. There's the constant issue that we have with pets and oil painting. There we go. Got it. Okay. So like I said, I want to blend these cuticles in a little bit more. So I don't have any paint on this brush. The first thing I want to do is see how wet this paint is still and see if I can just move it around. That's like the most simple way to do this. I want to get rid of that darker value, either move it around or pull it off. And I ended up pulling it off to make it a little bit more subtle. Because when I squinted down, when we were looking at that Photoshop image where I was kind of illustrating it in Photoshop as if we were squinting, the edge of those cuticles, the edge of the fingers just blended in directly into the neck. And I think right away that looks better. The shape of the highlight is a little bit off. And there's a subtle transition that can come up into the finger that I want to get. But before I go to that, I'm going to do the same here. I'm just tapping these darker values, especially this one. That one's way too dark. It's overstated. It's way too overstated. So let's just tap the corner of our brush on these areas. I'm picking up paint and moving paint at the same time in a very subtle way. Just tap, tap, tap. The end of that fingernail could be a little bit less stated, bringing that value down. It's a very particular thing. And I think, no, I know this. I don't think this. But when we're dealing with the details within fingers and hands, and especially faces, one of the reasons why they're so hard is because the subtlety that exists within them. There's all this subtlety that we have to see first and then understand later. But, got to see it first. That's the most important thing. And I think that's one of the bigger keys to painting hands and fingers. Not in such a specific way that we're getting into like a 2-hair brush and getting into all the specifics of everything, but how to do it simply so we can describe everything we want without, number one, a tremendous amount of work, and number two, overstating everything a bit too much. Okay, so that looks better. Look, I just tapped them all down and it got me to where I wanted to go. But that didn't take very much at all. So all up in here is a bunch of purples and things. I could probably, the highlight on this fingernail, I could probably bring that up a little bit. So I'm going to mix up a color that fits with this area in a very general way. What does that mean, Chris? Just a random purple-ish color. Now, if I do ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, definitely that's going to make a purple because we have a cool red and a very cool blue. Actually, that's one of the warmer blues you can get is ultramarine, but it's the coolest thing on my palette. See, and that makes like this very intense purple as soon as I add white to it. That's definitely not what we want there. It's too intense. I'm going to brighten it up a little bit more. I need more paint. Need more paint. And I have to be careful with that alizarin because it has a very high tinting strength. Okay. What's the best way to bring down purple in saturation? So let's desaturate it 2 ways. Let's add black to it and white to it because black is going to desaturate it and darken it, but I want to bring it back up in value. So add a little bit of white. You can see how that gets desaturated. Hopefully, I know it's a little bit darker on your screen. I can't have both. I can't have a well-lit painting and a well-lit palette at the same time. Cameras just don't pick up that much information. They don't pick up enough information, which is annoying. Now, the other way of desaturating is by using the complementary to the color that we have. What's the complementary to purple? Well, I can use this. Yay. All we have to do, so when I say purple, we could say violet too. Same thing, right? So we're into this kind of violet, like right in the middle. So we just go right across the color wheel to yellow. That's going to desaturate it. Okay. And I'm just mixing up a bunch more of that purple so I can desaturate it on this side. And we're going to do yellow ochre. Now, yellow ochre is also a yellow, but it's also brighter. So it's going to lighten this purple up a little bit. It's going to desaturate it. On the warm side, you could see the difference. Let me add a little bit of white. Bring that value up a little bit more. And look at the difference. We've taken the same purple, we desaturated in 2 different ways, right? I prefer this way within what we're working in here. Yeah, the gray will desaturate it, but you see how we're more blue on this side, more towards the cooler tones. This looks a little bit more like, Caucasian skin and shadow. It's definitely way too dark with anything that I have down, so we're going to lighten it up some more. One way I like to keep my palette organized. I'm just remixing up everything together right there. One way I like to keep my palette organized, and you may want to do this, I'm on into a bunch of whole different things right now, but you see I started with this color here with this purple, and then I adjusted it, and then I adjusted it again, but I'm adjusting it not in the same pile. I'm moving the pile over. Not only am I using less paint with each one because bringing in different mixtures, but I have more purple, more of this, more of that. So I'm adding in more paint as I make it. But I can have these transitions that I can dip into, even this one later if I need to. Like for instance, if I have this kind of warmish color here and I want to gray it up a little bit more closer to blue, I'll just bring it over here. Mix it in with that little area, some of it, and then I've grayed it up a bit. You see? It's a little bit a bit more practical way of organizing your palette. And then the hardest part about organizing your palette is keeping it that way, because you'll start mixing things into other things, and then halfway through the painting, it's all over the place. So let's see where this value is. Yeah, it's not too bad. I just wanted to put like a touch of that down to see how it compares to everything else. I want it to be a bit more warmer, like cad red warmth to it. So add a little bit in there. It's going to brighten it up a little bit. It's going to make it a little bit more saturated, lighten the value up, and create that. And now let's do this entire fingernail in one stroke. Well, two strokes really, because I do the overhanded stroke for the tip and then right at the back of the fingernail, right where the cuticle is on this side. As I look at this, we're always thinking about drawing too. I think I made this finger a lot, too long. So I'm going to elongate this finger a little bit more as well. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that drawing being a little bit off. That still may be too dark. Now that I put it down with like a big chunk of paint, it feels too dark. So what I'm going to do is ignore it a little bit for now. And I want this cooler purple that we mixed up. Let me bring in a bit more of the black. And what I want is the highlight on that fingernail, but I don't want it to be too different. So I'm testing it over here. Let's see what this does. Didn't quite do it. I think that darker color I put down is way too dark. No worries. The great thing about oil paint is that it stays wet, right? Hey, good morning, another person. Welcome. And a lot of people would say something completely different than that. The bad thing about oil painting is that it stays wet. So like within acrylic, this would already be dry. And if someone needs to adjust the color, they would just paint over it, right? But with oil paint, where a lot of people get kind of hung up on it, where they have difficulties, is understanding like this mixture that I made up. And I'm going to cover up this darker area that I just put down because I think it's a bit too light or too dark. I'm going to make this a little bit lighter than what I think it should be, because I know when I put this stroke down, it's going to mix with everything that I put down before it. So we're not only painting on the canvas, but we're mixing on the canvas at the same time. We always have to kind of think about that. Like what is already down there? And I'm trying to get another hair off of this. Oh my goodness. There we go. So there's always going to be a bit of mixture that happens on our surface, okay? That lightened that up fairly well, I think. Still a deep separation between the side of this finger and that dark color. It's a bit too much. You see how subtle this is? Like I'm getting into minutia here, and it could be could be one of those things where we look at it or you run into it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is why I don't paint hands or I avoid hands because it's so crazy with all that information, all that subtlety. Just avoid it altogether, right? That's what we want to do. But we can't learn if we start avoiding, these hard parts. One of the best things we can do as artists is tackle the hardest parts first. I know that sounds counterintuitive. I mean, when you go into college or school anywhere, they create lessons that are super easy at first, and then they increase the complexity as they go, right? I mean, that's the way that they've been doing things for years. Pile on the complexity. You're not going to start with calculus. You're going to start with addition, right? And then move into subtraction, multiplication, blah, blah, blah. And then completely ignore it because you're an artist and you're like, I hate this. That's what I did. And that kind of way of learning, I think, it makes sense in technical terms, math, sciences, things like that. But when we get into art, I'm sorry, but yeah, I think applying those same methodologies with learning just doesn't work. I want a separation between the neck and the fingers. I'm using the same brush here, but I'm going to make up a more warmish purple. So instead of starting with blue and alizarin, I'm starting with yellow ochre and cad red. And then I added blue to it. You can see how different that is. I mean, everything in here has those same colors within different proportions, right? But here we have something much different because I started the mixtures a little bit different. Now it got a little bit way too gray on me too quickly. And I'm looking for similar values as well as over here. I wouldn't consider myself, way too dark. I wouldn't consider myself a tonalist painter. Tonalism as in, focusing more on the transition from light to dark than anything else. Not thinking about, highly saturated colors. But I kind of do that most of the time. Okay, let's see where this is. That's not getting it. Need to warm it up a bit more. I was talking about this yesterday, and I'm doing the same thing here, where that's kind of there. As far as the color is concerned, I'm going to warm it up much more than I thought. But when I'm painting, the focus in my head is drawing first. Am I putting this brushstroke down in the correct spot? And am I moving the brush across the canvas in a way that, or the surface, in a way that will describe this part of the body the best, right? So that's the first thing I think about. Placement, drawing, direction, maybe even edges within that. Lighten it up more. And then the second thing I think about is value. Does it have the value that I want? Is it close enough? And then the third thing is temperature. I don't worry too much about hue. We're in that area. We're in the ballpark of hue, like purplish red, neutralized purplish red. So I get into the ballpark of it, close to it. But then it's all about temperature. Hey, Chris, welcome. Hi, Michael. Vincent is in the sunroom, laying down. My cats are strange. They love the heat. They're out there in the sunroom, like in the heat all day long. It's like 100 degrees. I'm like, guys, what are you doing? You're broken. Broken kittens. So you can see it's a bit more of a warmish kind of color there. The fingers are more going towards a purplish kind of color. The major difference between those two is the addition of alizarin versus cad red, and that's intentional. Is it exactly the same as, our reference? Probably not, but does it create that separation that I want between the two? Yes, it definitely does. Now, when I squint down though, and I'm looking at this finger here and the fingernail, the very top of it, right where the fingernail gets a little bit white, right? And to the side of that cuticle, we have a blending in of both of those. So I'm going to bring that background neck color all the way into the side of that finger. I'm just going to blend it in. Just get rid of it. Just let it go. Let it be simple. What we revel at artists from the 18th century, the Impressionists, like John Singer Sargent is definitely one of them. Anders Zorn, Monet. I'm just saying all the big names because that's all I know right off the top of my head. All these big name artists, right, from back then, and we look at them. We're like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing how simply they have described this finger or hand. Normally when we're far back from the painting, we're like, man, that's a beautiful hand. It is so gorgeous. I mean, it looks exactly like a hand. We move up to the painting, we get like 3 feet away from it instead of 30 feet away. And we say, wow, it's just like 4 or 5 brushstrokes. It's so simply stated. And the funny thing is, and I say this because I've done it for years, is we come into our own painting. And the first thing we do is kind of throw all that knowledge out the window and we start describing things in the most minute detail possible. And start putting in all this little subtle information. And that, which is fine because that's how we, begin to understand the complexity of hands, faces, everything like that. We have to kind of move through that stage in our art career of describing things with tremendous detail. It's how we're like moving through to begin understanding what things look like, right? Now I'm going to be right in this area of color for the shadow, the rest of the shadow shape on this finger. And I think we forget sometimes how simply these artists state things. And I want to show you because I know I have a close-up of a John Singer Sargent painting that you can look at on here. I don't think I have like the pulled out version of it. Where are you, John? John Singer Sargent. Do I? Oh, I knew I had it at one point. I guess not. Weird. Could have sworn I had something like that. Maybe I have a super high res image from one of John Singer Sargent's paintings, his portraits. I mean, I have one of his self portraits that shows a lot of simplicity, ones that go like way far off with a lot more information. Yeah, I don't have like super high res images. Okay, let's do this one. I think this would be a good example, honestly. Show my screen. John Singer Sargent painting. This is actually in the National Gallery of Washington, D.C. I know this because I've seen it in person. It's not a huge painting. I don't really know what size it is, but I remember it, being in this huge space, right, next to other paintings. It wasn't that big. And what's really interesting about this is how simply everything is painted, even the hands and the face. It gets even more simple, especially when we look in this dress. It is paint first, but there's so much information communicated in such a simple way here. We can feel the fabric here being like a silk kind of fabric because of the reflections that are happening on it from the light source. There's like this blue that's happening. We can feel that this very complex fabric here. I mean, look at all that information that he put in there with just minimal brushstrokes. I mean, a master of simplification, describing a tremendous amount with just a little bit, like a few touches. But we can see that this fabric is a little bit different than this more silky fabric here. And the hands, I mean, these, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fingers all intertwined, plus the shadows in between. I see everything within that. But then we move closer to this canvas, and everything just devolves into paint, into the simplicity of it. John Singer Sargent was known to go with the form. That means like down the fingers rather than across the fingers, and to still be able to describe the form of these objects by going with them, which was, many artists look at and go, holy cow, that's crazy. How can you do that? But look how that kind of devolves into nothing. This is what I want to get to. This is a really subjective idea. I mean, we could sit there and paint these fingers to tremendous detail, right? But I love the idea of like the simplification of things. It's a very subjective term. Now, I want to show you this table, okay? I believe he scraped into the canvas. So the paint was still wet. Highlight, just scrape it down real quick. And then at the very bottom, we know that there's some kind of ornamenture at the bottom of this table leg. And it's just scraped in just a couple pieces. It catches some highlight. That's all I need to show you that it ends there. Same thing with like a little bit of light catching the bottom of that couch leg, right? Just little tiny touches. I mean, look at the ornamenture up here in this frame. Isn't that beautiful? Just bam. Look at that. Just this stroke here. You can see where it started. You can see how hard he pressed because he's kind of squishing out the paint on either side of that brush stroke, and intentionally pulls away slowly within that stroke so it fades off, gets a little bit darker because we have the addition of the background and that paint stroke kind of doing an optical blend. So it's bright and then darker. One stroke describes everything. And if you think that that's not intentional, you have to think again, because it is 100% intentional. The same thing is here. This is one big dark stroke, starts up here, goes down. He even, at this point, probably twisted the brush a little bit as it comes down and then lifts up slightly to create, a fading of that information. He could do so much. Here's another one. Same exact thing. Starts here, twists the brush, pulls it off the canvas slowly and all the way up into here to create that little subtlety. This whole entire stroke here across the base of the frame, sharp here for that highlight, and then intentionally just hits the tops of the texture of that canvas, and it brings the value down. It's optical mixtures, right? We can see the delineation of each of those little pieces of paint hitting the top there. I think this is multiple strokes because we have like a yellow and then a white there. But all of that little bit of information done in 1 or 2 strokes. Yeah, I definitely wanted to show you that. Okay. Chris, have you set up a Discord channel? I do have a Discord channel for the Painter's Path, but I haven't really figured out how I'm going to like kind of bring that in together into not only, advertising it and getting people in there, but also like how I'm going to manage it. I know the majority of conversations that happen and communication from Nicholas Uribe is done solely within his Discord, which is fantastic. I mean, it's super nice to be able to have a dedicated space to like share with his community, which is nice. But I got so much other stuff going on right now. Excuse, right? That I'm not sure if I want to add that in yet. I'm not sure if I want to bring that in as part of all the things that I have to do. I love looking at that John Singer Sargent. It's already influencing me to think about how each of these brushstrokes are going to go down, how the beginning of the stroke, the end of the stroke, and how those value changes should inform the form of this small part of this finger that I want to speak about. We could do so much with so little. I think there's a tendency, and I do this all the time as well. But before I get into that, I want to talk to you about this little thing here. I can pull out a million little things that I do within painting that I've learned over the years within these subtleties. See this finger here, okay? You see this shadow shape that I painted in, which is like this curve, okay? I'm going to take a little bit of that off. Ooh, I like how it brightens up. Kind of glows on the edge there when I just bring some of that light through. Ooh, I love the look of that. Do it on that one a little bit. Didn't work as much. So you see the shape here. It's like this concave ellipse. But then look at the finger on the right side. What the heck is that on the right side? It's some kind of notch from somewhere. I think it's the earring that's up here cast this perfect shadow down onto that finger, and it created this little notch. Yeah, even on this finger on the end, we see a little bit of that earring kind of hanging out, I think. Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not certain. I have no idea what that is. But here's the thing. I could totally get in here and go, and just turn off my brain, not think about anything, and put that little notch of shadow in on this finger. I hope you see what I'm talking about. But I know for a fact that we don't take it for granted because it's in a photo, because it's a photo. We know that the photo is impartial and will grab something that's there, whether we understand it or not. And so we're going to accept it. We're going to accept it as is and natural. But there are certain things that we can put into our painting, like that specific thing, that as soon as we put it in, it's going to not look right. It's going to look like, because there's that detachment with photo. And where did my reference go? My goodness. It just totally died. Oh, it's duh. There it is right there. Sorry. There's a detachment between photos and paintings. You have to, quote unquote, convince the viewer that your painting is accurate. And that convincing has to happen, right? It's not something where you can go, well, it's just what I saw there, so I painted it. We have to look at this and go, well, that's not going to look right. It's, we could paint it as exactly as the image, but there's a lot of things that you would put down and it would just go, it would confuse the viewer. Like, I don't know what that is. The other example I talk about on that a lot, I think this is a really good example. I was painting a landscape once with a friend of mine, and we had sat down to paint like this parking lot because we were just having fun painting, right? And we sat in this certain position. So the stop sign that we were looking at was on edge. You couldn't see the big sign that said stop. It was just a big black stick in the middle of what we were looking at. And we both looked at that. And we actually put it on our painting. I remember that. And then we both said, that just looks like we made a big mistake on our painting. There's this big black mark in the center of our paintings, and it didn't look right. And we had to make the decision on that painting like, okay, either I try and paint all the specificity that's part of that stick that was a stop sign, or I just leave it out completely and don't worry about confusing somebody or myself. And so we left it out. I asked a friend of mine that paints landscapes, and I'm like, hey, how do you deal with those trees? And you know what I'm talking about. These trees that you look at and you see the delineation of every single leaf on the trees because it's little tiny leaves and they don't group up into big shapes on the trees. And so it just looks like this kind of fuzzy thing right in front of you, like a million different leaves. It's like, how do you paint a swarm of bees or a swarm of birds in the sky and make them look accurate without having to paint every single leaf or every single bird or every single bee to communicate that? His answer was, I don't. I avoid them like the plague. And these are things that, first you paint it and then you go, wow, that looks terrible or it doesn't look right. It doesn't communicate what it should because it's this subtlety that, I can't convince people in this painting to look at and know that it's some weird cast shadow there. And so the only course of action there, I think the best course of action is to remove it. The lazy course of action. That conversation always comes in when you simplify things. It's so funny. I had a person that was commenting about that. It was a good comment because they were really trying to figure out, like, I think within themselves, within the comment, like, if I simplify, am I just being lazy? And just trying to find ways to not paint the painting? Or is it the exact opposite of that, where I'm trying to find the other level of painting? That road that has been traveled by John Singer Sargent, Anders Zorn, and Soroya, and all of these amazing artists that could simplify what they're looking at, what they're painting, and still have that sense of accuracy and describe to the viewer what they're looking at with a poetic way of describing the information. And I believe it's the latter. I believe it's this thing where that's the next level for me and for art in general, like the simplification of it, the beauty of simplification. That's what I love. And I know a lot of people could agree with that, and that'd be fine. Where I think a lot of non-artists out there think that the height of art is within tremendous detail. If it looks exactly like the photo, that is, you've achieved the best of art right there. And I'm glad it's not that simple. If art was that simple, if painting was that simple, where all it was is just how close can we recognize all the subtleties and values in color and then paint that faithfully, as naturalistic as we can with what's in front of us. If that was the beginning and end of all of art, I wouldn't do it. I'd probably quit pretty soon within it because I'm like, okay, figured that one out. Now we're done. Right? I like the infinity of it. I also like the aspect of art where we lose words. Like words just don't describe it. You know, for 400 plus years, everybody's been trying to paint as well as Rembrandt. Um, there's a lot of subjectivity there, of course, right? But we look at Rembrandt paintings and we're like, you know, how did he do it? How is it? How, you know, we can look at it in a technical way and say, I see every place that he put brushstrokes down. And I can repeat that. I can do a master copy that looks exactly like a Rembrandt, but the essence of it, the poetry of it, didn't capture it for some reason. Like it's not there. Why is why how is it different, you know? I know the technicals of it, but I don't know the passion behind it, you know. I love that aspect of art. And we see that within these little moments within fingers when we're looking at subtlety within value. We're looking at those moments when we're painting something and we say, you know what, that's just not going to translate well into a painting. So I'm going to leave it out. Like parts of those things are the moments that we see within this art game that separates it from understanding and this kind of like technical ability to see value and color and exactness that, you know, a camera can capture from these bits where the best writers on art struggle to find the words, you know. I really like that. I really like the simple, really simple way that I describe the end of that finger. And I want to keep as much of that as I can. So I'm thinking John Singer Sargent. Okay. Pretty much have everything I need there. There's a couple things I want to do with edges. There's a lighter side to this finger. It brings in, and I'm squinting down. Squint, squint, squint. We talked about that, right? Right at the very beginning. So this kind of lighter area where it's like a reflected light from the sky or something coming in here. Just barely adjust that edge a little bit. I mean, Sargent would have done that in one stroke and it would look 10 times better. And if it didn't, he would have scraped it down and do it again. Crazy. Oof. See, I didn't like adding that in. That did not work. Okay. Needs to go darker and a bit warmer. Not that dark, I think. Yeah. You can tell when an artist is really putting their brain into what they're doing because like me, I can't speak and paint at the same time. Gotten a lot better at that. It's more like word salad all the time. Okay. I think that's fine for that side of this finger. I think it describes everything that it needs to be. But this side, I really love how the dark area of that shadow kind of fades into this reflected light on the side of this finger. It's beautiful. It's just this gorgeous little moment. And what that's going to take is not only have the right temperature, but especially the right value here to find that transition between the two. A little bit lighter. Yeah, I think that's all it needs. Maybe a little bit of a transition. See, it's really sharp here. This brush stroke is really sharp and I want to soften it down. So I'm not going to blend it. I'm not going to try and blend that. It's probably already set a little bit. What I'm going to do instead is take a lighter value that's warm and just kind of tap on the other side of it, utilizing the edges of the bristles of the brush that create an edge that isn't sharp. It's a little bit stipply, if that makes sense. Just to soften that down. And then this one right here, I want to lighten this up. And then a small, quick indication for the end of that thumb. Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I'm going to get a separate brush for the gray of this shirt, which is a very, very light value, but I definitely want it separated from everything else. We've talked before about, kind of brush, not economy. I wanted to say economy. That's like brush stroke economy, but like when to determine on when to change a brush or clean a brush as you're painting. And this is one of those places. Actually, I've done it before already within today's session. The neck is like this kind of warmer thing. The tips of these fingers are more of a purplish kind of color. Two separate brushes. The very light value of the sun hitting these fingers. Another brush, so it's a third brush. My fourth brush is this gray shirt. It's very simply, all I'm doing is just separating objects, right? The shirt is a completely different color. And if we think about it that way, that kind of simple way, use our brushes in that way, we can simplify, not simplify, but we can do the separation between these objects and help the viewer understand that these are separate objects through like the subtle coloration changes. Like if I was doing the background, which is a green, which, you don't find hardly anywhere within the body here, I would definitely use a different brush there. Oof, way too dark. Bring that value back up. Bring it up. One thing that I love to kind of push or punch up a bit as far as saturation, you can see it really here on the edge of this finger. And I'm going to do it a little bit more, honestly. Cad red with this lemon yellow is going to make this crazy orange, and a little bit of white to brighten it up even more. That was too much. Right when shadows pass into direct sunlight, you're going to get this really cool spot. Really interesting, not cool. It's very warm usually. Well, at least on here, it's really warm. You're going to get this really warm, super saturated transition that happens there. And I always push that. I love it so much. I just push it. I think if I'm correct on this, which I could be completely wrong, I think that little thing with light is what Monet was focusing on for years and years when he painted. Just that little transition of saturation that's there. I just want to barely indicate that there's a knuckle here. Yeah, look at that. That little tap. Oof, I like that. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. I'm feeling pretty good about those fingers. I like that everything fades down over here, that it goes away. The only thing I don't like is how that green kind of stops right there. I feel like the finger is continuing up into that value. So I want to get a different brush for that green. And I remember that was a very subdued green. So we got yellow ochre, alizarin, not alizarin, sorry, ultramarine blue, and white. It'll be a very grayish green. On the reference right there, you can see, if I go to the reference, it gets really white on the edge there. That green turns into, I don't know, it might be some kind of fence or something in the background. I have no idea. I'm not going to put that in because it's blending in too much with that finger. I'm making a change there. Um, so it's darker so I can have more clear separation. And I may, like, there's this little bit of, I'm going to go back to it. Little bit of that shirt that darkens up gives us an indication of how that shirt kind of wraps around the neck. I may punch that up a bit. Gives us an idea of that form a little bit more. And I remember this was around this color here. So sharpen up the neck here a little bit, or the end of it. And then get my gray brush. That's my green brush. This is one of those triangle shapes that I feel like if I focus, I can get it in one stroke. It needs to be a little bit darker. See, I got the location, I got the drawing of that down, but I didn't get the value where I wanted it. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Maybe sharpen up this edge just a tiny bit. So subtle. So subtle. But I felt that that was important because, you know, when we have chances within fabric that it gives us, where it'll say something like, okay, I'm traveling around the form of this body. In life drawing, we don't do nudes. We do, you know, you have to have at least underwear on, right? And the cool thing about it is when you have a bra or underwear, boxers or something wrapping around the body, it's such a wonderful thing to look at because we're like, you can, if they were nude, you wouldn't understand too well the shape of that form, of their form, right? But when you have clothing that wraps around your body, it gives you a better understanding. And see, you know, that little bit, I was like, let me capture that little bit of light. No, Chris, put it back, put it back. Details attract attention, and I have more than enough attention down here. I don't need more, right? I don't need the viewer to get caught up in all of the fabric. It's not important, not as important as everything else. I'm good with all these fingers for right now. I may change them later, but it's feeling pretty good. It's not my best, but it's looking pretty good. Let's move up to the face up here. There's a bunch going on up here, and the focal point is here within the neck. But I feel a need to refine this face here a bit more. But I want to do it as simple as I can, simply. And one of the things that we were looking at or doing yesterday was understanding that there's a fall off of light. So this is the brightest bright we will have, and there's going to be a fall of light as we go down. So it's going to get a bit darker as we come down. And that will really give this idea of like the light is more intense here, then everything kind of comes down from there. But we're still in this very, very light zone, right about here, I would say. And I'm going to test that with what I put down yesterday. And yeah, that's pretty close within that value range. So I know I need to be way up in here. Also warmth. So just a little bit of yellow ochre, maybe just a tiny tap of cad red to bring this together. Let's block in some of this. Let's do the nose first. See, I was talking about this with John Singer Sargent. How I paint and how I enjoy painting is I go across the form, like across the bridge of this nose, like that. Sargent would go straight with the bridge of that nose, just poof, straight down. And then that would be like the highlight at the end because he would probably already established all of his halftones or center light within that and then throwing it down, you know, a quick highlight onto the end of that nose and have been just pop out just perfectly. Gorgeous. And the, you know, the one thing I'm definitely going to grab on this nose that I want is you see right before it transitions into shadow there, how it gets orange right at the nostril, right where the nose rings are. Super orange there. Oh, yes. I am definitely going to get that in there at some point. But right now, it's just establishing a lot of this value. Getting some paint down in those areas with a closer value. I need to pick up some more white. Okay. Since we started on the nose, let's kind of stay around there. Because again, thinking about drawing, so I want the placement of this stroke to be where it needs to go the first time. Drawing value temperature, drawing value temperature, drawing value temperature. It's like my brain over and over again. Oh, geez. Sorry, give me 1 second. I left my paints in a bag. I need to grab that out. I did some painting at Life Drawing yesterday, trying to do these simple, very simple studies of just one color. I chose a burnt umber on Yupo paper and trying to describe light and shadow with just one color and big strokes while looking at a real figure in real life. So hard. Super influenced by Scott Connery. Not Sean Connery, but Scott Connery. And how he was simply painting the figure like that. I showed that on yesterday's stream. So if you want to check that out, that was yesterday. Did I do as well? No, not at all. It's so funny. You look at these things and you're like, oh, I could totally see where all those strokes begin and where the ones end. Yeah, I got the concept. Let's go do this. And then you get there and you go to put it down and you're like, damn it. How did you do that, Scott? I don't understand. Why is it so good when you do it and so simple and so hard? You know, it reminds me, there's like so many people that are like, oh, I'm going to just try some abstraction. And it looks so simple. Abstract painting looks so simple. It is a trap, let me tell you. Because you're like, oh, that's simple. You know, I can do like this one big stroke on the canvas and make it look as elegant as that and beautiful with, you know, this amazing mark making. And then you try it, you go, holy cow. You know, it looks like a 2-year-old did that. Maybe that's not the best comment, but anyway, yeah, a lot harder than you think. Even though it looks simple, pretty darn difficult. I have a dilemma here. I want you to see this. You see where I put this shadow shape over, on the white paper, and I'm pretty sure that that's there. Maybe I could scrape into it. Let's see if I can scrape into it. Ooh, I can. Wow, look how it brightened up. See the intensity that came into that color there where I scraped it? Like we get a bit more intense. That's the effect of bringing some of the white through paint, the white of your surface through paint. I used to paint on gray all the time. Now I paint on white because I love having that range to be able to achieve. But let me get back to the dilemma here. So I have this shadow shape down. It's just a line. Let's look at the painting, the reference up close. Just a line, okay? Now, if I come in here and I just paint around that line because I want to keep it, it's going to look, it won't look as good. So, or maybe it will. I don't know. But I have a feeling that if I try and just paint around it, it's going to feel um, like I'm choosing the shadow shape over the form of the face, when the form of the face should come first and the shadow should be like act like it goes over the form of the face. But if I'm adjusting all of my brush strokes based on where that shadow side begins and ends, it's going to cause the brush strokes that I put down to be incongruent with the form of the face, I think. Does that make sense? Because when we put brushstrokes down, it isn't like we're painting a wall and we're just trying to repeat where one color ends and one value ends and one begins or whatever. It's also thinking about the form, and this is going to be in the painter's path with understanding form. It's also about understanding that this top of the cheek, where like the zygomatic arch, no, the zygomatic arch is up here, but right at the top of this cheek here, where we have some, I think a lot more fat than muscle. Maybe there's obviously muscle there, but it's the bottom part of the eye socket. So that comes out a little bit further. We kind of curve down and then into a shadow shape, and it's very subtle. And then back out, you're into the mandible, the muscle that's over the mandible, which helps us chew, right there. So we have this kind of undulation of form in and out of space. Okay. And if I'm doing all of my strokes based on, just not wanting to mess up that line, I'm going to probably mess up the form instead. And the form is paramount, more important than that. Yeah, I really do. I really do think it is. So, what do we do instead? What's the solution? The solution is to trust ourselves. The solution is to say, I can get those shadow shapes back. I can bring them back. So I'm going to go over it. I'm going to focus on the form of the head first. I'm darkening this up a little bit because we're going lower away from our really bright sunlight up there. The fall off of light, I'm thinking about that and how the cheek kind of falls down as well. I really need to have a bigger brush for this, I think. Oof, no, 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 no. It needs to be lighter. So I'm thinking more about the form of this cheek than I am about the shadow shapes that are beneath it. So I'm covering all of that up. It's still a little bit wet there. So I'm picking up some of it, which is fantastic. That's going to make a lot of this blend in a little bit more, which is good. It's going to soften things out. And I think that softness there is going to be a bit better than this kind of crazy brushstroke that was there. Just very subtle value changes. Mm. You can see how I'm trying to shape my brush strokes so that they go with the form or against the form. It's not only, changing that value there and putting paint down, but it's also trying to describe the shape of that form. It's trying to think about it in space, trying to think about how it gets a bit concave there, just a tiny bit. And how can I put a stroke down that does that? And I feel a bit of grayness in there too, maybe closer to brown. Like this kind of brownish color over here, but still fairly high value. I'm going to bring a little bit of black into it. Oof, need to warm it up a bit. Yeah. When we go into shadow, Rubens did this a lot. Did it to almost detriment in some ways. We have this like very warm light and we pass into shadow. It gets cooler, just a tiny bit cooler. A lot of Rubens paintings, it gets like blue, like it goes from this like warm yellowish tone into like this kind of grayish tone, like really takes it further, almost too far in some places. How dare you say too far with Rubens? Just masterful painter. My goodness, Chris. You're right. You're right. Softening these edges out. I have paint under there that's pretty dry. So these edges are sharp. So I'm definitely using more opaque paint and scraping it over to soften out edges, especially here on the side. We get kind of into the sideburns. It's a very like light touch way of working that's happening here. It's kind of like you see this brushstroke here and all of them up in the hair, where the brush was very dry and you see more of the hairs, the bristles of the brush than you do anything else. It's exactly what we were looking at on, well, not exactly because it's John Singer Sargent and I can't do that. But the idea is there where it's like this kind of light touch. So we're changing the value not by changing paint in our brush, but just lifting it up just a bit off the canvas, off of our surface. So that a little bit of what's down there already shows through, but we're adjusting the value just a tiny bit. That brushstroke went too far down. Hopefully you see that. Like that value, it lightened up that value too much. Killed the shape of that face right there. Okay. Now I'm going to bring just straight, almost straight white up here. And I am going, I'm being too influenced by that previous brushstroke of the shadow of the glasses. So I need to ignore that a little bit more. Think about the shape of the face. Warm that up. Yeah, that's getting there. There's this really interesting shape here where the glasses, there's some light kind of coming through the glasses. I put it down with way too much impasto. So let's try an alternate route. Let's try scraping. Okay, well, it pulled off that stroke, but not the rest. So that's fine. I have to be careful with this shape. I think hopefully you see what I'm talking about. Let me zoom into this. So right there, shadow shape right on the cheek underneath the glasses where the rim of the glasses is casting a shadow, but because of the angle of light inside of that shadow shape right to the right of the nostril, there is light kind of coming into that shadow shape. And it's right here, right? I don't have the correct shape of that. You know, it's this kind of like triangle thing. I have to be careful with that because it's another one of those places where, yeah, it looks perfect on the photo. It's a beautiful little moment within the photo, but how is that going to translate into a painting? I know that artists, you know, like this is where the mastery in artists like Michael James Smith, and I wish I had like a bank of other artists that paint that detailed kind of in my head so I could point them out. But I know this is where like hyper realist artists like Michael James Smith has a tremendous amount of understanding and information. Maybe I should give him a call and say, "Hey, can I do an interview with you?" That'd be kind of cool. I don't know. I feel like he would go, "How many followers you have? Really? No. I don't do interviews with anybody less than the New York Times or something." Or maybe he's like really cool and he's like, "Heck yeah, let's do this." But I think he would have a ton to say about those moments in photography that look good in the photo, but you want to avoid like the plague when you're painting because it'd be almost impossible to get it to look as convincing. There's so much little subtlety within these lips and everything moving up. Okay. But everything that I talked about within the fingers is going to be the exact truth, same things within the face. It's just a different object, right? Um, we do have to treat the head a little bit differently, different shapes, different subtleties, um, some different aspects, but it's all going to boil down to similar essences of fundamentals. I'm still thinking about drawing first, value second, temperature third. And yes, within that, and I'm not saying it, there is edges that I'm thinking about. There's how the brush moves across the canvas to create certain textures that I want. The difference between the texture of hair versus the texture of skin, and trying to find the simple way of describing that. Like there's a tremendous amount of complexity within this. But for the most part, those few things, drawing, value, temperature, are going to be what we focus on the most. And seeing the subtleties within them. Like, for instance, there is a very small space right here where the cheek catches a little bit of light. Super important to give the viewer that understanding of where the cheek ends and the background begins. And there's also like this hairline of light on that cheek as well. I need to squint down, and when I squint down, it ends and then begins again. But if I don't squint down, it's just a continual line. Let me show you what I'm talking about when I say that. I want to be up in here, something a little bit darker. So if I did this how I was seeing it, I would be over here in this really high value. If I squint down, it ends. It really kind of just blends into the background at one point and then comes back out. So it is a sharper line down here, closer to the lips. But then it cuts off abruptly on that edge. I want to get a little bit more close to the initial of that. You see, I got a blending in the background there. There's a reality I think that creates that I don't feel like I can get with more detail, if that makes sense. I wish I could explain that well, but there's so many instances within painting where, and I think it's more of a feeling for me, and I think a lot of other people would disagree, where it gets so hyper realistic that it starts to look fake again. It doesn't look like reality. It's unreal. It's like with photography, you see a lot of photographers doing this like super high definition stuff, and it's high definition all over the place. Like a landscape photo of like an ocean or something like that with a surfer on there. And, from every single edge of the painting, from beginning to end, from top to bottom, everything has this super, super high realistic detail to it. Even the tiniest little bit of every wave and every undulation of water has just tremendous detail to it. And it's like, wow, that is so hyper real that it looks fake. It doesn't look real. It has crossed into the unreal. Um, and I don't know that maybe that's just me. Maybe other people look at it and they go, oh man, that's beautiful. And that's good. I'm sure other people do that. And that's fantastic. But for myself, I'm like, no, I think a bit more simple is better. A bit more simple is better. Let the viewer in, let them make a determination. Let them have commentary on what they think, the wave at that point might be doing. Okay. So the general shape of the chin here is not drawn well. I need to bring it out a bit more. And that's my darker value here, which needs to get warmed up a bit more, closer to a warmer red, not a bluish red, something closer to yellowy orange, really. A red orange. There you go. As I look up at my color wheel. Too dark. Too dark. Nope. Lighten it up. How are we going to lighten it up? Let's bring in yellow ochre because it's a lighter value and a little bit of white. Thinking about the drawing of this, the edge of that chin. This is one of those moments when I like that I've done a background because I can always, paint the background into foreground and the foreground into the background to reshape that contour to get closer to where it needs to be. It does make life a little bit easier. And I'm lightening up this edge a little bit because I put it on there pretty dark. I think in the value it needs to be, but I wanted to lighten up that edge to kind of turn that form a little bit more as well. There's so many opportunities in describing how any form turns right close to the contour of those forms, right at the edge. It's like a couple millimeters of space, and that's where we put all the information we need to tell our viewer, hey, that turns back in space. Okay, it needs to darken up there. Okay, I'm going to take a quick, like, minute break or less, and I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I heard something happening in the home. I have my door closed, and I'm like, what is going on out there? A particularly fun training session with Vincent and my partner. Okay. Looking pretty good, looking okay. The lips need a lot of help. There's this interesting kind of like light value that, man, because the sun is kind of raking down the front of that face, there's all these little bips and bops. Oh my gosh, bips and bops, really? These little moments where, like this chin, the chin catches a little bit of light right there. You can see a little bit of light caught there. The how this bottom lip kind of turns under, catches light. Oh, like all these little moments within there that's just crazy. It's going to be hard to capture a lot of that. And this painting is definitely going to be going into another session, maybe two, the next session and one after that as well. Yeah, I don't foresee being able to get everything that I want to get done in this session here, which is okay. Some paintings go really fast, other paintings just need more attention. I know it's like some subject matter I look at and I'm like, man, I can understand that right away. I can see how the whole painting's going to go from beginning to end. And then other ones, I'm like, I'm not sure. I think it's going to be fun. And then I get into it and it's like the struggle bus, just on the struggle bus for days and days and days before I can crack the code on it. And I'm not sure which one is better. I think it's one of those moments where a lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, take the easy route." I would rather, part of me says, "Yeah, bips and bops." Funny guy, Chris, right? The technical terms of painting. Hey, look at the back of my head. Every time I have to reach down and get these napkins, I need to switch places on those at one point. The technical terms of bips and bops, right? Need to use better language all the time. But when I go through and when I have a lot of paintings and some of them just really 3 days or less, a few hours, and I'm like, oh, that looks beautiful, just like that. Awesome, man. I'm such a better painter. I feel like a better painter because I can get to it quickly, easily, describe it quickly, and everything kind of falls in place. And part of me, I'm like, yeah, I need more paintings like that. That's awesome. That's a really great feeling. And then part of me that runs into paintings that just kick my butt. But at the end, I'm like, okay, I finally figured that out. I've understood that a little bit more. It was a struggle. Sometimes I feel like those are better in a different way. It's like, I don't know if anybody listening is gamers, but the most fulfilling games that I've ever played have been the ones that have been so hard that there's lots of struggle, some cursing, right? And then at the end, you complete it, you finish it, and then you're like, yes, the arms go up in the air, there's some elation. Yeah, the struggle. It's like we've achieved greatness. Something that was very difficult for us to do, took a bunch of trial and error, and then we finally got it. It's almost like it's more important. That struggle is directly proportionate to the fulfillment of success at the end, I think. Maybe. I think it really depends on, who we are at the time. Some days I'm like, yeah, bring on the struggle. Then other days I'm like, I don't need struggle. I need simple today. Simple and easy. I'm being way too detailed with the bottom lip. I'm not sure why. I'm trying to understand what's happening here. There's so much going on with this just little moment. I'm not sure how well that's working either. I'm going to look at the digital version of it on the stream in a second, and then that'll tell me if I need to start over. Yeah, there you go. Could really have an interesting video if all I do is paint a beautiful painting and then go, okay, let's burn it. Let's destroy it. Start over. I don't like this one little bit of it, so I'm just going to start over from the beginning. I did that once. Oh, not burning a painting, but like years and years ago, like one of my first Facebook accounts when I actually did Facebook. I had recently got back into Facebook. Facebook is terrible. Just saying. Recently got back into it because everyone locally, that's how they get all their information. So I'm like, okay, fine. Let's do Facebook again. But I remember years and years ago, I was on it. And I had a crap ton of paintings at home. And they were all studies, right? Well, not studies. No, they were real paintings. There were paintings that I did that I was learning a bunch on. But they were all bad. They were all bad paintings. Objectively bad paintings. I'm going to actually say that. Right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure there would be people that would enjoy those paintings. Yes, totally. But for me, I was like, nope, these paintings had their time. I learned from them. Now it's time to say goodbye. So, I had this like 50-gallon trash can and I filled it with paintings. Bottom to top, stuffed them in there. There were a bunch of like canvas boards and things like that, like bent them all to hell to make them fit into the can, right? And then I took a picture of it and put it on Facebook. I was like, yeah, bad paintings, garbage. And man, did people get pissed. It was so like, that painting on the top looks good. What are you doing? So upset. And that's fine. You're going to get upset about it, but it was my work, so I could choose to do that. But they had kind of run their course, and I had removed myself from this like continual like preciousness with paintings, because at that point, I don't know how many paintings I had done at that point. I think it was like, I want to say 2016, 2017. So 10 years ago. I've done, I don't know how many paintings since then, like hundreds and hundreds of paintings since then. And a lot of failed ones that have ended up in the garbage, and a lot of wonderful ones that I've sold since then, right? But I think there is a part of doing this thing of painting where we have to kind of let go of the preciousness. And I think it's, um, what's the word? I think it's more, I think it's better for us. I was looking for a better word than that. I think it's better for us to have some of that, to be able to let this go and not be so precious with everything that we do, so that we can, separate our identity from the good paintings or the bad paintings as well as the good paintings, so we can separate ourselves from that and look at it as more like a stepping stone, right? Like we do a really great painting and be like, oh man, that's really awesome, I'm happy about it, okay, on to the next. That's in the past, I learned from it, now let me see if I can repeat that success. And then most of the time, no, it's like some other thing you're doing is really challenging you, which is, the right way of things should be. You should always be challenged in some way to help further your art career. And then um, let it go after that. I there's many artists I've talked to, and they collect their own work, and it's cool. I'm this is all my opinion on these things, right? Totally cool if we want to collect our own work, but I would prefer if it's shared with the wider world. Like, put it out there, get rid of it, move on to the next, empty out your home of all those paintings. Um, Show that enjoyment and that awesome stuff that you did with everyone else. I think I love that there's all these paintings that I can look at on my website that I did years ago, that I don't have, that people bought and they love, they had a connection with. And it's going to be a big part of their home and hopefully their life for decades to come. But having that separation, right? Like, if this painting fails completely, like if I hate it at the end and I decide not to sell it, okay, cool. What did I learn from it? Like, even during the painting process, that separation is important, because if we get too caught up in like, oh, it's got to be perfect, it's got to be exact, it's got to be the best thing ever, we're going to heap so much of that stuff on top of our shoulders that it's going to be hard to even move through the painting. How are we going to paint over, those few lines that we put down to make room for a better version of this painting if we're so attached to everything we did and we're so afraid that we can't make changes? We can't scrape out like half of the face to make room for, a better value that needs to come in and improve the painting in some way. And I've heard of teachers doing this, and I think this is the wrong way of going about it, where, they try and teach that separation, like this is just a stepping stone, of, one painting and on to the next. And you're learning from this, and that's the purpose of this painting, and to not be so precious about it. But they teach it in the way where they're like, okay, do the painting, work hard on it, and then now we're going to paint over it, whether you like it or not. And, many young artists are aghast. They're like, oh my gosh, what? Are you kidding me? I worked so hard on this. I really enjoy this painting. I think that's the wrong way of going about it. I don't think we should force anybody to um, feel our own opinion. I think we can use our words and say, hey, I think it's better if we separate a little bit from our painting. Let ourselves open up to the idea of um, it having a separate life beyond us in some way, or it just to exist, this painting to just exist to give us information on how to make the next painting better. And that's its full purpose, and it'll be okay. Love that idea. But ultimately, it's a very personal one, right? It's one of those ideas that needs to be personal. I can't tell someone like, no, 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 you need to sell that right away. You make some money on it, let it go, just sell it, you know. Or no, don't even show that painting or whatever, something negative like that. No, I can't tell people to do that. No. It's the way I would like to work, but you find your way through it. I'll give you my opinion, and then it's up to you to take it or not. I think that's where it's important. Yeah, I think I'm going to bring the value down. As soon as I put in this kind of laugh line or this shadow that happens here, it's not really resolved just yet. It brings in this understanding that this needs to be darker here, that needs to be darker there, all throughout this chin. Like this whole bam needs to darken up. Yeah, definitely. And even just a little bit lighter, but there's a bulging of this lip here, which is really beautiful, where it comes out here, and we have everything within shadow shapes that every object will get. We have light side, shadow side, reflected light, all in this little area. And the edges within all that, how it needs to function differently. Man, this is how we can get just overwhelmed. I can understand like being overwhelmed. I remember being overwhelmed by the face, hands, body. There's like a tremendous amount of information. And it's like, okay, how in the heck do I translate all of this? I don't understand it. How am I going to translate it? Okay, this is going to be important. I'm going to try and do that little bit of light that's caught onto the chin. The shape isn't quite there, but it's close. Does that look like it was painted, or does it actually look like it's part of the chin? I am not certain. Oof, all the subtlety within the shadow shape. How simple can I get it? How simple can I put it down? How brave can I get with this? We were looking at John Singer Sargent at the beginning of this stream, and all of those brushstrokes that just described everything within one stroke that he needed. I mean, there's a lot of bravery within that. Like, of course, he's done it a million times over, right? But at the same time, it was like, hey, I could screw this up, or I could have this chance of really knocking it out the park, right? Like it's that one thing I always say. If we want to hit the game winning home run in the World Series, we also have to be willing to strike out at the same time, because both are possible at the same exact time. Step up to the plate, be willing to strike out, and also open up that possibility for doing something great. And we're doing that with almost every brushstroke in our paintings. Are you being romantic, Chris? Yes, every single stream, every time I talk about anything, of course I'm being romantic. I am a romanticist. When it comes to painting, yes, give me romance or give me death, right? No, it's okay. I could still be alive without the romance. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. But no, I love the romance of it. I mean, how else are we going to keep this going for the rest of our lives, right? If you don't have some kind of romance in it. If you just show up every day, you clock in and then, okay, I got to lay in this painting and then do, the values and the shadow side, and then, got to do this puppy for this person, and then paint that portrait for this person, and, run through the same thing, and then end the day, and that's it. And the next morning you wake up and you do the same thing over and over again, and you have as much interest in it as if you were walking through like the same day at, I don't know, at the office, right? No, no, please don't paint like that. Try and find the passion, please. Try and find that passion. Okay, as soon as I put that little nostril in, doesn't have the best shape to it, but it really brought some things together there. I think it's looking good. It's a bit too sharp in a lot of ways there. Like we got all these sharp edges everywhere. It's really pulling away from our focal point. A lot of high contrast in there as well. That's me looking at the photo and like thinking about everything that is within the photo and translating it exactly, and not thinking about the entirety of the composition. That's what that is. Is it bad? It depends on how you want your painting to go, right? There's so many more concerns that we can have within a single painting. It's not just about those little moments that we get caught up in that are absolutely gorgeous, but it's also about the whole of the painting. I'm reminded of Stephen King's book on writing, which is a really good book. Here's a super prolific creative person talking about creativity and work ethic, right? It's a wonderful book to read for artists, musicians, and everybody, because it translates within art, music, dance, everything, because they're all creative acts, right? But he had that saying, kill your darlings, right? Where there's these things that you love that you put in there, these little moments within your painting or your writing that is just, you think is the best thing on the planet, but it just doesn't work within the whole of the script or the whole of the novel. And you got to decide, make that tough decision on when to let it go. And I haven't done that yet. I'm talking about it, but I'm still painting in the details here, still going through the motions. I'm hoping that, the magic fairy will come by and make the painting better. If I just keep putting brushstrokes down, that'll help, or that'll happen, right? Maybe. Let's go for this orange up here. See, this is it's a good example of one of those moments. Like it's super orange, like intense, and I'm trying to mine some yellow out of this junk up here, which I should put some yellow down, but I'm being lazy. So this high saturation that's right here, it's not as, I don't have it as saturated as it could be, but is this going to pull away from my focal point? Probably. Does that mean I should probably not put it down? Probably not. I'm going to do it anyways. I'm hanging on to that. No, I want to do it. I want to do it. I honestly think that I've learned a ton while painting, within the past 13, 14 years. And most of everything else I learned is more like relearning what I forgot that I already learned. I hope it doesn't get worse than that. Like, where I'm just forgetting everything. That would be terrible. Oh no. Every day would be like starting a new painting. My first painting. And that's why I write everything down. As I move through these paintings, I take notes on them and things like that. Each session, I try and take some notes. And usually I put them on my daily art blog as well. So if you want to ever see that. So what I'm doing here on this nose is probably the same exact thing that I'm doing on, no, it is the same exact thing that I do on every form. Everything has its own subtlety, of course, but it's still the aspects of light, the same aspects of light that we deal with if whether we're painting a sphere for a course or drawing a pear for the painter's path course. But it's all about, okay, there's the light side, there's the shadow side. Within the light side, we have our highlight, we have our center light, we have our halftone. Within the shadow side, we have our terminator, our core shadow, and reflected light. And we see the same things over and over and over again, just resolved in different ways depending on the shape of the object. And each one of those little things, we're like, okay, we would put it down with the right shape, drawing first, the right value, a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, and the right temperature, a little bit closer to red, a little bit closer to blue, everything like that. It's so funny how things can be just the same thing over and over again, but so different all the time too. The infinite variations within a simple, limited amount of variables. Reminds me of photography. Photography, ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. That's it. That's the majority of what you have to deal with. Of course, there's composition and a bunch of other different little things, but that's the majority of it. And there's an infinite amount of variation that can happen within all that. We have everybody from Ansel Adams to, I'm trying to think of another photographer. Yep, I'm not into photography, I guess. Ansel Adams to a whole bunch of different awesome people. And they all deal with the same thing. Okay. I am running out of things to ramble about. Let's talk about this painting specifically right after I do a couple more brushstrokes here. Let's talk about the problems it has. First, let's look at it in a digital way. Oh, geez. Knocking over everything. And actually, I want to see this in a little bit more higher detail on the stream, so I'm going to change it to 4K. Okay. So that's a little bit more higher detail. You're getting more pixels sent your way. I could zoom in, but I want to see the whole painting right now. And, exactly what I said earlier, the very first thing that I see that's a problem here is all the hard edges I see. Yeah, when we look at the reference, there are a lot of, pretty hard edges around there because it's direct sunlight. But I'm thinking in a compositional sense, like I don't want that part of the face to take up, this center of interest. I don't want that to be the center of interest. It will be because it's eyes and it's a face. That's what we're going to look at first. There's where I want the center of interest. I want the picture to be about that. So I need to soften. I need to soften a lot of this. I see a few places that I can soften right away. So, excuse me. But to do that, I think I have to force myself to, oh, geez, hold on. Or not really force myself, but we have to think about the reference as in service to a narrative. Um, and if it's in service to that narrative, then we need to make adjustments to it, adjustments to all these sharp edges that we do see. So it speaks to more about the larger narrative that you want to talk about in the painting. Yeah, another thing I see is like this little darker gray area that's here. It's like a shadow being cast from somewhere up top, from the face or glasses or something. Yeah, that needs to go away. It's like this little kind of chunk of darkness that comes out that's distracting. It's I was just talking about it's one of those things where we can look at it and I can know and you can know that it's part of this photograph. But when this painting is hanging up or when it's on even on my website and you don't see the reference right next to it, it's one of those things where it's like, what is that? That's some kind of weird thing. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense there. So let's remove it. Let's cover it up. Let's get rid of it. You know, even bring this shadow shape. Needs to be lighter. A little bit closer to the edge there. And that's really sharp. I don't want it that sharp. Does it look like the image? No, it doesn't. It's different from the image. And that's what I'm talking about up here. It needs to be different. Uh it needs to be in service of the narrative first. And I guess that's why, because I'm all about narrative all the time. I'm all about the story behind things, like more than the surface, more than the image that we're copying from, more than that, right? I'm always about like, what are you trying to tell me? Rather than, hey, look at this cool image. I'm going to reproduce it exactly the way I see it. And I want you to see the image exactly the way it is without my involvement whatsoever, like not show any brushstrokes or anything, right? And although super skillful and amazing to do that, it subverts any kind of narrative, any kind of story for the subservience to the image. When I feel that the image should serve the narrative first, tell me a story, make me feel something. I want to feel sadness. I want to feel happiness. I want to look at a painting and have like this exhalation of like, oh my gosh, just get punched in the gut with a painting. That's what I want to feel. It's just like movies. And I know people feel very different than this, but I would rather go see a movie that I have to think about because it's affected me so much. Like the next 2 weeks where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm still thinking about that movie. That thing, wow, it just floored me with, you know, the narrative behind it or the emotion. Oh, the way that person felt, or I'm still tearing up from that movie because, it was such a beautiful drama, right? Is it just like that with movies? I want to feel the same thing with movies. I want to feel the narrative. I don't want it to be like, hey, look, this is life in tremendous IMAX detail. And it's not saying anything else beyond that. It's just this. And I think that's why I have issue with um like very hyper real ways of painting. It's why I don't like it, which, of course, is very particular to me. It is definitely the right way to paint, but no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Joking. But yeah, I just want to feel something. But there's a lot of people that walk into like a gallery or a museum and they go, yeah, I just want to see some beautiful paintings and how beautiful the scenes were at that point. Just show me a pretty landscape. I don't care about like the emotion behind the landscape. I just want something beautiful. Totally cool. Not me, but totally cool. Who the hell am I to tell people how to feel, right? No, never. Although I would love to argue with anybody about it, have some kind of discourse. I mean, do you guys remember? Oh, what was his name? Oh my goodness. Really good painter, but was in every mall in America for years. Thomas Kincaid. Michael says, just found an old fishing rod. I will use it to put my hand for details. Oh, a fishing rod? That's interesting. So in America, I know, Michael, I know you're in a different country, but in America, we had this artist named, oh, I just said it, just forgot. Thomas Kincaid, Kinkade. Really good painter, honestly. I saw a lot. I remember going into one of those malls and they actually had some of his plein air paintings. And me and a friend of mine were like, these are really good. But he got really famous for doing these really beautiful, very pastoral, pretty scenes that didn't have much to them beyond, the pretty of them. They were very, dare I say, Disney eyes, like Disney-esque paintings, where it was all about like happiness and beauty and very high contrast and high saturation everywhere. And people loved them for years and years and years. Would always buy those paintings, Of course, we would make fun of them. We would make fun of them, and then we would go, yeah, but we're not a millionaire from our paintings, so how can we talk negative about it? It's like, let's make fun of this artist that is tremendously wealthy for their artwork. Kind of stupid. But it was definitely apparent that we didn't like going that route, Although, I will say this, I think what captured people from Thomas Kincaid, of course, his paintings were very detailed, they were very pretty, but he also had a message with them. And the message, I think, along with the paintings, I think is what really captured the hearts of a lot of people. And in that aspect, when I'm thinking about his paintings in that way, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's nice. So all that to say that the important thing, at least for this painting, is to adjust the painting or make adjustments away from the photo in service of the narrative. And definitely lighten up the shadow. Make it lighter than what you think it needs to be, because it is. Oh, it looks like a big scar down the side of their face. I do not like. I do not like. Yeah, Doobie the Cat, the master of light. I remember you would go into a Thomas Kincaid studio, and in the mall, and every single light in there would have a dimmer switch on it, and the salespeople would bring you over and talk to you about how masterful the light was when they dimmed the light and then brought the light up. And me and a friend of mine, we were there because we were oil painters, and they were all prints, right? They were prints of oil paintings, really well done prints. I will say that. Like the prints were top notch, really good. I mean, they're asking thousands and thousands of dollars for them. Better be, right? Um, but then they would do embellishments on top of the print with oil paint. And the one thing we know about oil paint is that it's pigment suspended in oil. And because it's suspended in oil, it has a richness that a print will never get. I don't care. I mean, there is no process on the planet yet that gets close to, like, you will do a print of a painting and it's still, a shade, a very sad shade of the original oil painting. But on these Thomas Kincaid prints, there would be oil paint on the highlighted areas, like where the bits of like a street light would light up, and that would be oil paint. And of course, those would shone with all kinds of brilliance when the light, when they would dim the light or bring the light up. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful effect of, just really looking at the science of how oil paint just reacts in comparative to like a printed ink on or G clay on a canvas, whatever G clay is. So was it a product of the master of light, Thomas Kincaid, or was it just the science of oil painting? And I think it was just the science of oil painting. So, but that message, that idea, that salesmanship really captured a lot of people. Yeah, I'm going to have to think about that, the cast shadow there, because right now it's looking like ass. Yeah. Don't like it. Don't like it at all. That's an example. It's a really good example of something that we look at in reality on a photo and we can accept it and we go, oh, that's kind of cool. And then we look at a painting and it just doesn't work. Or maybe, just think about it this way, maybe, Chris, you're not doing it right. That's probably closer to the truth. So saying it that way, I am now challenged to keep it regardless and figure it out. That's the challenge. It's not working. How can I get it to work? I mean, and it's this like high contrast thing, dark against light, that's pulling away from everything here. Ooh, how can I get that to work, push it back, not make it that important, but keep it working? We'll see. We shall see. Okay. That's going to be the end of the stream today. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Wow. Way too long. So much rambling, so much talking about nothing. Tomorrow is Friday. What's happening Friday for me? Half the time I forget to look at my calendar and I tell people, oh, I'm going to be on here tomorrow. And then I look at my calendar and I'm like, no, okay, I'm all open for Friday tomorrow. So I will see you tomorrow on the live stream to continue on with this painting. Doobie says, will the shadow be less pronounced if you put the glasses frame in? Like more understandable because, oh, that's, we got this other line coming across. Maybe. We'll see. I'll start with that tomorrow. Put that in there. See if it's, the combination of both of those lines coming together and making a understandable image or a more understandable thing. Honestly, I think where it lies, where the difference lies, is the value within here needs to darken up a bit, and within the sideburn, within the ear, and all the way back here. And I think that value combination plus the glasses in will make that seem less intense, less high contrast. And if that doesn't work, then I'll try and play with the edges and the value of it compared to everything else. Yeah, we'll see. We shall see. Lots to learn tomorrow on this. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, chrisbevan.com for my website for mentorships, one-on-one versus one-to-many, like, well, yeah, group mentorships, also the painter's path, working on that. That's Sunday, 1 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. So if you want to show up live for that, or support me on here, like, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff for free. And especially, probably the most important thing, which I would like for you to do, is just show up and ask questions. That's the connection that I'm looking for. Of course, you can give me money or like and subscribe, and all that's cool, but I'd like to hear from you more than anything. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Bye-bye.